Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CISL 650.
Talking citizenship law on this episode of the program with Rudy Kischer and Alex Stojicevic from the Vancouver citizenship and immigration law firm Maynard Kischer Stojicevic. We talked about all sorts of elements regarding this new Citizenship Act, which was proclaimed last year and which we'll see the full force of sometime later this year. Alex is gambling on Canada Day. Rudy's saying perhaps earlier in June. Nobody really knows. But one thing I've completely neglected to ask you both, what does it cost to become a citizenship, to put all this paperwork in progress? And you guys are going to remind people about how important it is to get the paperwork, to get the wheels turning now. But what costs are attached to filing and getting the paperwork done?
Well, the government's been slow to tell us when they're going to enact the new provisions, but they haven't been slow to increase the cost. So,
okay.
So January 2nd, it went up to $600.
Oh, it's already gone up. They've jacked up the tab already. Oh, okay.
$630 is what it costs per adult to apply. It used to be $400, and shortly before that it was $200. So it's gone up over 300% if we take a look at that time frame. I don't know when they'll increase it again, but right now you're stuck with a price tag of $630.
Alex, Rudy has pointed out on a couple of occasions in this hour already the need to be aware of the timeline that's now unraveling and to get those wheels turning. Can you elaborate again? This is important stuff.
Because the residence requirements are changing, the changes in the linguistic requirements, in addition to that, the changes in terms of tax filing and lack of credit for time you were here already on a work permit or a study permit.
Right.
Some people under these new rules, when it goes from 3 years out of 4 to 4 years out of 6, may not be eligible for at least another 2 years. So if you apply this year, if you're eligible, you should do it and apply before June 1st. And if you're not sure, you should consider calling somebody who can review your situation, because there are significant advantages to you to apply before June 1st. Because if the law changes, you may have to wait another 18 months or 2 years before you can again.
And particularly in those classes when you're talking about language requirements, right now you only have to take a language test to prove language ability if you're over the age of 18. They're reducing that to 14. So if somebody has young children that have recently moved to Canada and they don't speak English, that's going to be a problem.
They're expanding it at the other end. They're lowering the age on the front end, but they're also increasing the age at the back end.
Yeah. So now if you're 55 and older, you don't have to prove your language ability. Now they're increasing that to 65. So there's going to be an increased hurdle, increased cost in terms of either getting that language test or finding that. I mean, one of the things that you can provide is your old high school graduation certificate. Who has that still, right? Is the school still around in some cases, right? How are you going to get that? You're going to then look at the cost of a language test, which costs you over $200. Right?
Okay, so again,
you add up all these costs. Family of 4 applying for citizenship, $1,500 in fees. If you have to do a language test, if you have to get copies of your degree or diploma, this is very possibly a $2,000 process without any additional costs. That's just the basics now. And before you throw that kind of investment in, it's sometimes worth it to have sit down with one of us for a small few $100 investment. We can tell you if you're going down the right track and if it's worth spending this money now and when it might be better.
And if nothing else, if you are going to go forward with the application and all the rest of it, Rudy, then how to make sure all those ducks are in a row, that paperwork is properly filed.
Well, I think, contact somebody at our office. We're happy to sit down with you and go over everything and make sure that you're starting off on the right foot, because the citizenship process also isn't a short process. I mean, applications now take 2 to 3 years. You don't want to be sitting in queue, having expectations that, I'm getting my Canadian passport, and then get a letter saying, sorry, you calculated the days wrong, you didn't provide us the right English test.
Alex, there was a story in the paper a couple of weeks ago about an apartment building in downtown Vancouver that's going to be taken over by an international student accommodation organization, which will allow for students from afar to find a place to live while they're here studying in Vancouver, make it easier for everybody. So what about those student provisions? If you've come to British Columbia or Canada from afar and you've taken a 4-year degree, Canadian degree program, and you got your scroll, those 4 years no longer count as 4 years when you submit your request for Canadian citizenship.
That's right.
It's shrunk to how many?
No, now under the new law, the only time that counts is time you were a permanent resident. None of the time.
So student visa doesn't qualify as permanent resident?
Student visa, work permit, none of that qualifies.
The government used to give you credit that 2-to-1. So if you'd spent 2 years in Canada as a student,
you get a year.
You get a year.
That's gone.
Completely.
Yeah.
So then what is the advantage? Obviously, there's the quality of education issue, but there used to be a tremendous advantage to having students from afar come to Canada to study, because that was kind of their door into Canadian society.
Well, it's still their door. The problem is that the door's still there. The corridor just got a whole lot longer. That's all. The walk is a little longer than it used to be.
So it's still possible, though.
Oh, it is, absolutely, but it's going to take longer. And for those people who are in that situation, who became permanent residents, particularly in the last 3 years, they should seriously even consider if it's a difference between I go home in April or May for 3 weeks to see my uncle in India or my mother-in-law in China or whatever it is. They may want to consider not taking that trip if it means that their eligibility date is going to spin past June 1st into July or August, because then they're in the world of the new act, and they may have to wait an additional 18 months or 2 years before they're eligible again.
Do you have to physically be here in Canada, Rudy, when your application is received and processed by the government? Is that imperative as well?
The current law is no, you can file that and you can leave. So if you spent your time here, you can be gone the next day to take a job abroad. As we discussed earlier, that's going to change. I think, and we don't know how the law is going to be enforced or interpreted because it's new. Mm-hmm. So as lawyers, we're advising on the conservative side to make sure, I think once you file your application, you better stay in Canada, which is my understanding a requirement in the States, that you actually remain in Canada, and actually, when you take your oath, that you have the intention to remain in Canada. Because that's part of the
and there's people that are penalized for this that are really not the intent of. Like, for example, if you have a new immigrant who has a child in Canada, and you want to take the kid back to see the family.
Sure.
And maybe you're spending a quarter of your time outside of Canada. Certainly, none of us would believe that person is not worthy of citizenship for a completely legitimate reason.
For showing off
their
the
time.
baby, for crying out loud.
And yet people like this are going to have to watch carefully their days because they may not qualify.
Yeah.
Seems unnecessarily harsh.
Well, the playing field is definitely changing. They're moving the goalposts. They've done it once, and they changed the dollar fee a month or so ago, and now they're going to do it again by, according to our guests' estimates, by July 1st at the latest. It's called the New Citizenship Act, and you know what? A lawyer is going to be one of your best allies through this process, by the sounds of things. Rudy Kischer, Alex Stojicevic, good to see you guys. Thanks so much for a really informative hour.
Thank you, Stirling.
Thank you, Stirling, for having us.
That's my pleasure. We'll see you next time on The Law Show.